Good evening. We will call this Planning Commission meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, consent items are first up. Draft meeting minutes for November 25th, 2024. We do not have quorum from the original members, so we will push that to the next meeting in hopes that we'll have enough people in that original group. Draft meeting minutes for December 9th, 2024 is up for consideration. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the meeting minutes from December 9th, 2024.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All against? The ayes have it. We will adopt those meeting minutes, draft meeting minutes, December 9th, 2024. Next is citizen input on non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on non-agenda items. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak. Staff and the Planning Commission will make every effort to respond to questions raised during citizens' input before the meeting ends or as quickly as possible thereafter. Do we have any? No, we do not have any citizen input, so we'll move right on to old business, which there is none. New business, none, which takes us to our public hearings section. Tonight, there's a matter before the hearing body that requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matters. If you wish to testify on these matters, please fill out a public testimony card and give to the recording secretary. When your name is called, please step forward to the microphone at the front of the table. State your name, address, and interest in the matter. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In doing so, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. All written testimony received, both for and against, shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. Staff will present, then we will hear any questions by the hearing body or staff. Chair will open to the public hearing. Will open the public hearing for testimony. Applicant will have a period of time. Proponents will have a period of time. Opponents will have a period of time, and rebuttal. Same period of time. Chair will close the public hearing. Questions, if any, by the hearing body. Discussion, if any by the hearing body. And a decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing on each matter, or it will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure of the public hearings? I don't see any questions. So, with that said, we will discuss Fence Code Update TA 25-02 with Mr. Ryan Potter.
Good evening, Chairperson Ellison and members of the commission. So tonight we once again are talking about fence standards. I know we've talked a lot about this, so this is a really short presentation because you've seen all this before, but unlike the previous work sessions that we've had, this is the formal text amendment. So this is memorializing what we've talked about, and I'll get a little into that. So let's see here. Oops. So like I said, we've had 6 work sessions. We've talked about many aspects of this subject. Through 5 of them, and then at the last one, like I said, we talked about the draft code that staff had prepared. So the next steps for this, so we've prepared the draft code changes. Tonight is the Planning Commission hearing, August 11th. August 20th, which is next Wednesday, is when this is scheduled to go before council. And then if council approves and adopts the code changes, the next step for us on staff is, and this is something we definitely heard from the Planning Commission, is we need to prepare diagrams and handouts that go with this new information and make sure it gets into the hands of not only the people that come in on a daily basis, but also to our usual suspects, builders and fence contractors. And then just worth mentioning, in the future, this winter, we will be starting our the earliest stages of our comprehensive code update. That'll be a couple-year process. So I think it's really good that we've delved really deep into this particular subject. We won't lose any of that, but there'll be another shot at if there's anything that anyone wants to change. We'll be looking at the entire code. And I think it's worth mentioning that the structure of our code will probably change quite a bit once we get through that comprehensive code update. None of us like how the current one is structured in chapters, and this particular subject, I think, will probably end up in a completely different chapter. It's kind of buried in a miscellaneous chapter now, so worth mentioning. But all this great work that we've done will obviously make it into that next process. So what is proposed, this is a amendment to our fence code. Nothing has really changed since we spoke with you last, except for I went back through and watched the video and listened to everything the commission said and tried to capture all those concerns and comments and edits. It's really minor edits. As you saw in the packet, those were changed and then highlighted the explanation for why that change was made. Like before, the biggest change in this code amendment is how we treat street-facing side yards on corner lots. That's the number one thing we heard about from people who wanted to see a change. That's the number one thing that our department's always struggling with applicants to implement. So that's definitely made it all the way through the process. That's still the number one thing, the biggest change. The one exception to nothing of substance changing is we did hear that you wanted some definitions, so we added a definition for fence and a definition for fence height, and those were in the packet as well. So because this is a formal text amendment, there's approval criteria for text amendments, and so there's 5 criteria. And you saw the analysis was in the staff report for these, but I'll just kind of highlight them. The first is consistency with your comp plan and your plans and policies. The comp plan is pretty high level, as you know, so something kind of as nitty gritty as the fence code doesn't really have a lot of impact on those big picture goals and policies. But in general, staff believe that the proposed code changes are consistent with those documents. Perhaps the most important, at least for this change, is the public need for the change. This whole thing started with people we talk to at the counter every day saying, this doesn't work for us. We have dogs that we can't box in our backyards. There's a big percentage of our yard that we can't utilize. The city code is just too restrictive. And so staff really felt like we had a clear mandate to make a change. So we definitely hit that criteria. There's a criteria about serving the public better than another change that the city could make. This particular issue, it really requires a code change. I'm not sure that there's really another avenue that you could do to remedy this. So that's pretty easy to meet. The one that's probably the most interesting is health safety and general welfare of the community. I think we talked most about this in the very first work session, that there's pluses and minuses to having tall fences versus short fences. So, obviously we're heading in a direction where more fences closer to the street will be higher. And obviously there's pluses and minuses to that. If your kids are playing in the backyard, this is going to be able to corral them more and they're safer in the backyard. If a kid is walking down the sidewalk and a car is backing out of a driveway, maybe that taller fence is perhaps less safe. So it's maybe kind of a wash, but in general, staff believe that the code changes in general further the general health and safety of the community. And that's definitely something that we heard all throughout these work sessions, that it was very clear that the Planning Commission had that front of mind safety. And that's something that we talked a lot about with vision clearance and things like that. And then lastly, statewide planning goals. That's kind of like our comp plan. Those are pretty high level things. We don't believe there's any reason why the fence code really affects our consistency with statewide planning goals. So really that's it. The options for the Planning Commission are to recommend the text amendment as written, recommend it with changes if needed, or the option to not recommend the text amendment to council. Ultimately, it's council that will adopt or not adopt this code change. So it is staff's recommendation that the Planning Commission approve this text amendment to the City of Canby Municipal Code. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? Questions?
Some great work and a lot of input, good feedback. Time to land the plane.
Yeah, I guess the feedback is just, that was probably my favorite packet of all time. You really did hit up, we got the original, we got the edits. I really liked the way that you wrote out the changes to really show this is what it was, this is what we're changing to, this is why we're changing to, and your comments. I really liked that document, so.
Thank you for saying that. Thanks.
And it was nice to see the hat tip to whoever had made the comments. And so it's like, hey, you said this, here's what you said. Mm-hmm. It was nice.
Yes.
So.
And I will say, even comments that maybe didn't directly end up in the revised code text are things that we all as staff are taking to heart and will be thinking of going forward into our comprehensive plan update and our transportation system plan update. One of the big things was the vision clearance, both at alleys and driveways and where streets meet. We definitely heard that loud and clear. The fence code itself doesn't necessarily remedy that issue. It never made sense from planning staff to embed specific distances. We would really like the TSP, which is ongoing. We're working on the TSP right now. That will give us a lot of guidance on how big vision clearance triangles should be, and those might end up bigger. And so it didn't make sense to be too prescriptive in this. But we definitely heard everything you guys said, and we're looking forward to getting this approved, but then moving on to the next stages.
So we've pretty much decided that alleys are alleys and they're a problem to, make conform to the rules of streets. And the fence code kind of reflects that, and as well as how we're treating fences butting up against the alleys, and all that makes sense in regards to what we talked about going up to this. I would appreciate if you could remind council that a street is not an alley, and that as we're looking at our transportation plans and city laws going forward, that, we have a vested interest in limiting traffic of a vehicular nature on the alleys. And then there's utility vehicles now, which is kind of what they were designed for. But, my concern is that they just get used by streets when things get clogged up. And we just don't have room in the code to adjust that site triangle to alleys because I don't think we're creating any more of them, and it's all kind of a legacy issue. And so I would just like to kind of see, go along with this, is that a concern that, we think about alleys a little more comprehensively in the future.
And that might be something for us to look at more closely with the code, because council does seem to want to regard them as streets, and then we're being kind of asked to regard them as streets for development. But if there's no drainage options and we've got limited visibility and we have all these other things, I don't know that we're really serving the community by having a lot of blind turns, frequently near elementary schools, because that's where most of our alleys are, and then not having proper drainage for utilities and whatnot. So I'd like to revisit that as well at some point.
I think the code amendment, one of the big focuses will be, and the comp plan will help this, is what do we want our community to look like and feel like, and that really echoes into urban design. And there's some pieces of urban design we can't control, but our code does have an impact on what alleys and streets and the urban form looks like. So I think we're all looking forward to that part of the code update.
Any other comments? Okay. So at this point, again, you either have a motion to approve as written, a motion to approve with changes, or a motion to reject as written. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion on TA 2502 that we recommend to move it forward to the City Council. I would also like to put in my 2 bits as far as the way staff approached this and the way you handled it was really good. I felt that it respected our time. We spent a lot of time talking about fences, and I think that your packet really reflected that and respected our time, and I appreciate that. And I hope that when you present this to the City Council, that you let them know how much time was actually put into this, not only on your behalf, but on our behalf too. So this has been an ongoing thing.
For sure.
And so I would, at this time, like to recommend approval of TA 2502, move forward to the City Council as written.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, by roll call vote, beginning with Commissioner Driscoll.
Aye.
Commissioner Jarosz.
Aye.
I am an aye. You're an aye.
Aye.
And Michael Hutchinson is an aye, so the ayes have it. We have approval of Fence Code Update TA 25-02 as written for City Council's our consideration. All right, so next up is items of interest, report from planning staff. What you got?
Good evening, Chair Olson and Planning Commissioners. I have a few things. A few items coming up. We have our housing production strategy for our next hearing item on August 25th. Another item that's been going on a while, and hopefully that discussion will be fruitful. We've been talking with the council about this as well. So housing production strategy hearing August 25th, and then September 8th, we'll have a planning commission work session on the comprehensive plan. Ryan, just to echo what he was talking about on just a reminder, our community summit is August 19th for a comprehensive plan. August 19th at Ackerman Library from 6 to 8 p.m. Would love to have you all there. That's going to be an update on our comprehensive plan, our transportation system plan, a bit on the urban growth boundary discussions, but mainly on the comprehensive plan and transportation system plan, which we're focusing on really trying to get done by the end of the year. Lots of moving pieces on this. We had a project advisory committee meeting last week on this, and a lot of elements going forward, but the community input is important as we continue, as Ryan is talking about, and we're kind of looking at the comprehensive plan, and then what are the pieces for the code implementation that are necessary as we update our code as well. Did want to mention that Leah McCarthy will be, I believe, probably joining us as a new planning commissioner in the next hearing on August 25th, or the meeting after that. So she and I met, and so we're excited to have her on as the new planning commissioner. And then I wanted to give a brief update on the electrical issues, transmission issues in the city of Canby. And if you have questions around that, I'm happy to speak to those. I'm going to try to be brief here on this topic. It's a transmission and not a capacity issue. So it's not a matter of electrical capacity, it's a matter of transmission. So there's 257 kV lines, PG&E lines that come into Canby that serve the city of Canby. This came up fairly recently in terms of discussions with PGE on this, and they have done a number of studies, and those studies have identified that there are large load limitations on peak demand on those lines, especially in light of 1 megawatt or larger loads. So these would not be what is called load growth, which would be residential development, typical development less than 1 megawatt. We rely on PGE on that line and those two lines that come in. Those two lines ultimately on a long-term solution need to become one line of 115 kV or 115,000 is what's necessary to feed the city. Part of the challenge is in the development review process, electrification is not really checked until occupancy. And so it's not checked at land use. It's not something that cities are required to do as part of their utilities, or not. It's not water, it's not sewer, storm drainage. It's not one of those elements that's mandated by the state. So this has put us in a very precarious situation to figure out what to do with the situation. And to complicate matters more, Canby Public Utility, which is our utility provider, gets they're contracted through Bonneville Power Administration. But Bonneville does not own the lines coming into the city. Those are PG&E lines. Very complicated mix of things. Many discussions around these items. One of the silver linings is our interim city administrator, Randy, who had 9 years of experience working with PGE. So that's been extremely helpful in solving some of the projects that were actually in pipeline that we weren't sure were going to be served, and those ended up getting served. So that's actually one of the silver linings. But this all leads the city to a point where we have gotten to the point through meetings with the board, Canby Utility Board and City Council, and discussions in that we have notified Department of Land Conservation and Development that we are considering a moratorium on 1 megawatt loads and large loads. That's a notification, and that's all it is at this point. It could end up, perhaps, best case scenario, there wouldn't be a moratorium issued if there was some solution that came up before we have a hearing, and we would not have a hearing less than 45 days from the notice, which should be, the earliest would be in October. So that all has to be formulated and discussed in a public hearing through City Council. City Council is the body that can create the moratorium. Canby Public Utility is a subdivision of the City of Canby, and therefore they do not have authority over issuing moratoriums. So all this being said, it felt like the right thing to do to provide the notice to DLCD, and that's all it is at this point, is a notice. For some time, we've been notifying developers that you're at risk if you're going to come in and you're a large load. You're at risk here to not having electrification. All this being said, this is new territory for me. I've seen sewer moratoriums, water moratoriums, and transportation moratoriums in my tenure as a planner. I've never seen electrical moratoriums. So this is all brand new territory because it's a regional entity that provides that. The good news, I think, and all this has created a large amount of discussion. There will be a work session on September 17 with City Council. Bonneville Power and PGE will be there to discuss this. This is all part of the background story that we need to put together for the staff report for the hearing that council will end up discussing these items. The goal here is, in the end, is to provide some solution here, and hopefully sooner than later. This does not have a bearing on our urban growth boundary expansion. That's a different situation that's related to annexation. It would relate, the issue would be annexations would need to have utilities before we could bring property into the city. That's one of those things that's not being affected here. But immediate development in the city for large loads is being affected. So people can still apply at risk, but the city needs to make a decision on whether or not in the future we will allow those developments to apply for land use development process. All that being said, it was a surprise that this kind of came out of the blue. It went from, there may be a problem, we're doing studies, but we think we can resolve it, to there's a serious problem, and this came out in April of this year. And when we were dealing with other applicants who were actually almost they were through the land use process and into the building process, and those fortunately got sorted and resolved. It's a bit more complicated. There's 2 substations in the city. There's Westcon on the west side, or the north side, and on the south side there's Knightsbridge. So how this gets sorted out in the long run, there's bit of unknowns here, but at least the parties that are part of this, Canby Public Utility, Bonneville Power, and PGE, are all very aware of this issue, and discussions are ongoing. So not a light decision by any means, a lot of late night meetings and stress around this issue. So hopefully it can be sorted. Industry is a huge part of cities and how they operate for both jobs, and just the revenue that they bring in to the city is substantial. So if there's questions around that, there's more to come. It'll all be publicly available information, but yes.
Do we have any current pipeline projects that are affected by this ambiguity?
There's a list of projects that have gone through land use, and we have one in particular in industry that's still trying to get through, but it looks like the others that are on the list that have gone through land use are not. They're going to be part of load growth. That's something which means that they could be permitted. That's part of what Canby Public Utility is going to need to sort out to a degree as well. They all appear to be less amounts than the 1 megawatt, except for one project, which is actively being worked on to try to get them sorted as well. That's been through the land use process.
Okay, so everything we've seen so far and given the green light to should be resolved.
There's all but one, yes, so far, yeah.
And with the 1 kilowatt hour.
Megawatt.
1
yeah.
megawatt. I could write down the right thing, kilowatt. The 1 megawatt level, the notice said that that's approximately 200 residential homes. So do we need to kind of keep track of how many residential homes are in the pipeline to be able to keep it under that level?
It's not, I'm not an electrical expert here,
Sure.
but it's not
Nor am I.
linear math equation. Residential, these larger load industries are different than my understanding, a cumulative issue of residential.
Gotcha, because it's kind of that peak demand, that it's a large thing with a large demand all at once.
Again, that's the understanding here. We're believing this is not going to permeate beyond like the industry or large commercial development. So this is like, industry requires a lot more electrical load, and I think I think there's cycles to electricity as well. And so like when you're in industry, you have a different cycle. At night, you're not like burning, so to speak, the midnight oil when you're in your house, like, doing all your stuff. You're doing that during the day. It's a different process. So there's different cycles and different load amounts that are part of that equation.
My understanding was they were trying to give like an order of magnitude for the lay person. I think it was less about 200 houses is going to trigger anything. They were just trying to communicate that's how much power
Roughly.
that amount of kilowatts is.
And I think part of that messaging, thank you, Ryan, is that really residential, like from an average consumer perspective, that really is, you're not being affected. Your electricity is not going to go out. this is why that was also put in there as well. So it's really about future industry that would be coming in.
Okay. And are we still too far away right now to have an idea of the timeline for them to find a resolution of the combining of the lines, or just knowing how long it's going to be a problem?
That's forthcoming, and I'm hoping on September 17 that we have some more dialogue around that, and in terms of what that looks like. And it's definitely reached the top end, entities, and including the state level. They're aware of this because OLCC was one of the ones that was possibly not going to be coming in. So that reached the governor's office. So there's large awareness around this issue.
Thank you.
Question. Give me an example, if you can, of what business we've got in our industrial park right now that's pulling a 1 megawatt. What is an example of that?
That's a really good question. And some of this is related to what they're doing. If you're doing welding, you might have a very small shop that could go over that. If you're doing a normal warehouse, the ones that were permitted recently, I think were just a large warehouse that stores things like an Amazon. That could be several 100,000 square feet. So let's say, for example, OLCC might be a good example. I think they were around that 1 megawatt, and they're about 350,000 square feet. So they're just storing things. They're not doing a refrigeration, and it's just dry product storage.
So it's a pretty low threshold, really.
1 megawatt's not very much
Right.
in the broad scheme of things. It's a lot compared to a home, but it's not that much when you look at industry load. So
A high load of motors will push the amperage and the voltage out
Sure.
of phase with each other.
Yeah.
And so then they have to put in a whole bunch of capacitors that also consume electricity. And so it's like, depending on what you're doing, sometimes you just double it to get where you want to go.
So how's this going to relate to our comp plan management, I guess you would say, moving forward with the state? How's that going to look?
So the state is aware of this issue, and our liaison, who is coordinating with us on everything from grants to our work products, she's aware of that, and it doesn't really have a bearing on that issue. From a state perspective, that's not something cities plan for, really, is electricity. That's not in the state law. She's, mentioned that, I know there's other utilities. Sandy's going through issues. They're not electrical, but they're in a moratorium right now. And so not necessarily a new thing for the state, other than, making them aware of that. And the state has offered some resources as well on experts that they have at the state. So that's something that will also be part of this discussion as well. They have people that are in that industry that are electrical experts. So I don't think it will have a bearing on our comp plan. The main thing is trying to get a plan together so this doesn't go on for a number of years. That's the critical path.
I just find it interesting now with the power situation, I guess we'll call it that. We've got the water situation going on, and they're trying to figure that out. I'm not exactly sure where we're at as far as sewer is concerned, capacity-wise, but I know water is an issue right now. And so now with this, it kind of makes me wonder how planning moving forward, we're going to be able to supply services for things that we're may or may not approve. So.
And I think it's a great question on the water issue. The water treatment plant's another thing that I believe is needed in the next 8 to 9 years. Part of the journey on the urban growth boundary process is we're still into this at least another 3 years, if not perhaps longer, depending on how all this goes. It is an incredibly long process to do this. Now, is it better to have that waiting in the wings and then you have your utility issues sorted out, or to, put a huge pause on things and wait for that? I think from an economic perspective, I would believe it would be better to be waiting in the wings until that's solved. that's part of that, because it's an enormous process that has to unfold here. And hopefully by that time, that matches up with that. So 3 or 4 years from now, hopefully that, we have that situation, sorted. Annexation is another year beyond that, and development is another year beyond that. So it just takes a long time. So your best case scenario is somebody actually developing and breaking ground 5 years from now. Planning is a very long range kind of thing. It does make it challenging, but at the same time, if those items aren't being worked on, and I guess the other part of that is if there is no pressure to solve that. The other part of it is we're mandated to plan for housing and employment for 20 years. So it's hard to do that without extra land to do that. So it's a challenge.
So since this power concern has come up, it might be worth throwing back out there. I brought up once before concern about server farms coming in and having a huge electrical load. So to me, it seems like it would be nice not to have that concern, to have some kind of cap that would preclude that from being an option, because they're noisy on top of being huge energy users. So if
And
we
they
are.
underpay.
What's that?
They get bulk rate on power, too.
Yeah.
They underpay. There's
Yes.
been a lot of discussion
And
nationwide about this.
compared to the rest of the region, Canby Utilities power, because they technically get it from BPA, is considerably cheaper than PGE's rates. So that would put us in a position to look very good compared to other areas. So if we're going to have issues bringing in power, it might be something we can kind of tie into that we have legitimate reasons to preclude that from coming in.
And that's a great comment, and there was echoing of sentiment by some council members as well. So kind of maybe going back into the code update, which is becoming this giant process, that very well could be part of that, would be prohibiting those data centers.
Wouldn't break my heart.
Yeah, and part of this is, there is a bit of a backstop here in that the 3 employees per acre in the Pioneer Industrial Park, you would never make that.
Sure.
But there are parts of the industrial park that are not in the Pioneer Industrial Center that could do that. So having jobs as part of your business is an important factor. That plays into the jobs housing balance versus just something that's sitting out there that's doesn't have any employment with it and does not a whole lot for the city. So in that regard, if there's limited electrical capacity, it would feel like a smart move on our end. We are in support of that.
Yeah.
So that's something, there wasn't a lot of discussion around that, but there's one very solid champion at the council that was mentioned at the last council meeting.
Great, thank you.
If they're going to shut down Knightsbridge to do this, whenever the fix is, I am going to be pissed. I'm just going to say that right up front. That's all I have to say on the matter. Actually, that's not true. Do we have items of interest or any other comments from Planning Commission?
I have a couple of quick things. South Ivy's looking sharp, man. If anybody, all those new sidewalks going in, wow, for the kiddles and everything, it's wonderful. So kudos to everybody involved in that. Just a nit, there was a Zoom invite sent for today's meeting, and it's a recurring, it has the wrong time on it. I don't think that matters, but just, it says 4 o'clock. And then a question, since there's some churn in the leadership level of the city, how is that affecting overall? Does that affect timelines? Or, I know some of the other groups have talked to me about the things are slow because approvals are slow within the city. I don't know, I'm just wondering.
It's a great question. I'm just going to speak to the planning department. There's been no impact, in terms of what we're doing on our end of things. I think our interim administrator has done a really good job of picking up a lot of pieces, and he's done a really good job with staff.
Excellent, thank you.
I think with the, invite, Emily can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it said 4 PM, the invites, because that's usually when we come down to start setting up. So I'm wondering if we can, maybe we can do an internal Zoom link or no?
No.
Okay.
I'm seeing construction where Walnut might be busting through. Are they getting rolling there?
It is, and I'm going to try to keep this short.
Say it.
Yeah, that is a sewer project there. We're working with the county on an intergovernmental agreement. That property's in the county, it's not in the city, it's not been annexed. So there's this discussion going on, which hopefully will result in the county saying, yes, you absolutely can take it over on your design standards, and you will guarantee that you're going to annex that property, which we will annex that property. There are plans that we understand for development on the north side of that developers want to develop that property, and that would be hand in hand with the road. Walnut Street and Southeast First would both come in with annexation. So those roads are not in the city right now. That's actively being discussed. It's good to see parts of this, though, to your point. That is the sewer piece that is actively being worked on. And as you drive into Canby, it's pretty obvious. Yeah.
I went down there with a lawn chair and cooler to sit on the side of the road and watch, but they kicked me out. I was all excited.
Okay, any other comments, concerns, questions? No? Okay. Do we have a motion for an adjournment?
I'll move that we adjourn.
All in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.